Laura Carstensen, we have you to thank for transforming how American society thinks about aging and the lifespans of our loved ones, our friends and colleagues, and each of us individually. Because of your dedication as a scholar and as a psychologist, we can reimagine our contributions to the well-being of our communities, our nation, and the world in ways that were unimaginable to previous generations. You have inspired us with your transformational insight that getting older can be a time of new opportunities and new purpose when we, as individuals and as a culture, embrace our aging with a positive and forward-looking understanding of our human abilities. President Mangelsdorf, I am proud to present Laura Carstensen for the honorary degree of Doctor of Science.
Laura Carstensen, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Science and invest you with all the rights, privileges pertaining thereunto. And now, I'm introducing Laura in it for another purpose. It gives me great pleasure to turn the podium over to Laura Carstensen to present our 2024 commencement address. Professor Carstensen is the Fairleigh S. Dickinson Jr. Professor in Public Policy at Stanford University. She is the founder and director of Stanford's Center on Longevity. I'm proud that her presence today is also a homecoming of sorts. Professor Carstensen is a Rochester native, and like me, she's the daughter of a professor, but she was the daughter of a professor from the University of Rochester. So she spent a lot of time on our campus. She's a true member of the university family and a graduate of our institution. As an internationally recognized scholar, her research and leadership on psychological lives of older adults has reshaped our appreciation of aging and given us all hope that we will all have fulfilling and engaging lives well into our later years. Please welcome Laura Carstensen.
Thank you. Thank you, President Mangelsdorf. Thank you, members of the Board of Trustees. What an honor it is to be with you today. Congratulations to the graduates. Today is testament to your strength and adaptability, and that truly is worth celebrating. For 30 years, I've been studying the ways we perceive time and how we perceive time influences our own well-being. And I'm going to tell you 3 stories this morning that center on the remarkable ability that we humans have to time travel. We can go back in time and imagine ourselves in previous states, and we can go into the future and imagine ourselves there. So the first story I want to tell you is about graduations, because it turns out that graduations spark time travel in both directions, because they mark endings and beginnings. So in recent days, you've probably had a lot of memories surface. You with me? You may have remembered your first day on campus, the day you met your roommate, the day you decided on a major, the day you changed your major. But with the exception of a few old souls, young people pretty much live in the future, always drifting to the next thing. I'm sure that many of you, right now, here today, are thinking about the plans you made for the rest of the day. Some of you are daydreaming about that great vacation you planned, or graduate school, the great job you landed, the fact that you don't have a job, but always one foot in the future. And you know, the what ifs, the dreams, the maybes can be exciting, but living in the future takes an emotional toll. Futures are uncertain, and what ifs are hard. Emotionally speaking, the late teens and the early 20s are the hardest time in life. And I like to tell young people this every chance I get, because at the same time life feels really hard emotionally, people are constantly telling you, and these are the best years of your life. No wonder you think, I don't want to get old. Trust me, research makes it abundantly clear. Emotionally, these are not the best times in your life, and you can look forward to the best emotional times in life coming later. Now, another downside of living in the future is that you miss the present. And life feels better when we live in the present. So try this. I'm going to ask you to come back to the present, here, today, this moment. And don't worry, it'll just be for a few seconds. Okay, you ready? You with me? Let time stand still. Focus on the ground beneath your feet. Feel that Rochester humidity on your skin. Breathe. Smell the smells of the recent rain. See your friends' smiles. Take in the crowd. Parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, university staff, all celebrating you. Look at the sky. Notice how this place, this time feels like home. When you return to campus in coming months, years, decades, and you're going to walk across the grounds, and there will be changes, but it's going to feel like home, because it is. Okay, done. Drift away. So the second story I want to tell you this morning is about how people who lived in the past are affecting your futures. You are going to live longer than any generations of humans because of the work that your ancestors began a century ago. For most of human history, life was short, and I mean really short. We don't know exactly what it was, but the estimates range from 18 to 20. And over the millennia, life expectancy slowly inched up over thousands of years. And now fast forward 1900 in the United States, life expectancy had reached 47. And by the end of that same century, it was 77. Let me put it this way. More years were added to average life expectancy in the 20th century than all years added across all prior millennia of human evolution combined. In a blink of an eye, we nearly doubled the length of our lives. How? Well, let's travel back in time now to just over 100 years ago. Now, you hear a lot about the good old days, but there was a lot not to like. There was usually a kind of a stench in the air from rotting waste somewhere, decaying animals. There was no public removal of waste, no garbage removal. There were no antibiotics, no vaccines for polio, diphtheria, tetanus. It was a world without electricity, which of course meant without refrigeration. The flu and gastrointestinal diseases, generally from foodborne pathogens, were the top causes of death. Now, death was common at all ages, and when illness struck, death came swiftly, within days or weeks. Maternal mortality was very high. But by far, the most precarious time in life was infancy. In this country, 100 years ago, 1 in every 4 babies born died before they reached 1. Close to half of them died before they reached 5. And so our ancestors, your ancestors, set out to save the lives of the young ones. Now, often this is told as a story about medical science, medical advances, and advances in medicine played a big role. But it's a broader story. It's a story about culture, and by culture I mean that crucible that holds science and technology, behavioral practices, social norms. It's a story about collective good, about partnerships among scientists, industries, governments, communities. Our ancestors discovered the causes of diseases and how they spread. And they found ways to inoculate the children against diseases they would never have to suffer. Great advances in vaccination were made here at Rochester. But these advances didn't stop with vaccinations and medicine. Our ancestors didn't stop there. They purified waterways. They pasteurized food. They built electrical transmission lines across the nation, and with electricity came new heating and cooling systems. Home refrigeration appeared for the first time. Importantly, community-wide programs were established, what we now call public health, to make sure that all the children were protected. New agricultural technologies were so effective that for the first time in history, there was a steady food supply throughout the year. And our ancestors didn't stop there. They put public education in place in every state in this great nation so that all children could learn how to read and write, not just the privileged few. And you know, today, at some point in adulthood, education is a better predictor of life expectancy than age. A stunning observation. And the babies started to survive. And by mid-century, life expectancies in adulthood were beginning to increase too. The magic happened because advances were widely distributed in the population. If only the wealthy had vaccines, electricity, refrigeration, education, lives would have remained short in the whole population. Our ancestors were so successful that by the end of the century, we, here today, were handed a gift of 30 extra years of life for the average person. No strings attached. I tell you this story because it's a story about what can be accomplished in just one lifetime when we work together. Now, to be clear, the doubling of life expectancy in a century is among the greatest challenges of the 21st century. We have a lot of work to do, but we're living at a time when the potentials of science and technology are breathtaking. Sometimes I worry that the bigger challenge is a lack of imagination. You know, so far, we took these extra years of life and we tacked them all on at the end, and only old age got longer. It's up to you to decide where these years should go. We can put them wherever we want. We could make childhood longer. We could stretch out the middle of life. You don't have to reach the peak of your careers at the same time you're raising young children. You can retire early and often. I am so optimistic that your generation is going to decide how to use these years. Your generation is a generation that cares about equity and justice. Your generation is remarkably open and accepting of differences across peoples and cultures. Your generation thinks globally, and all countries in the world are aging. The other message in this story is that you have time, more time than any prior generations. More time to chase your dreams, to spend with your loved ones, to realize your goals. You have time to make mistakes while you realize those goals and chase those dreams. Your lives will be marathons, not sprints. The message of this story is that when a generation works together, it can reach seemingly impossible goals. We're counting on you. Now, I told you that the University of Rochester is your home. This is indeed a homecoming for me. I grew up in Brighton, about 10 minutes away from the University of Rochester. My father was Ed Carstensen, a biophysicist and a professor of electrical engineering here. He founded the Center for Biomedical Ultrasound, which has subsequently been led by Professors Kevin Parker and Diane Delecky, who many of you know. The School of Engineering was the intellectual home that he cherished. He died in 2016 at the age of 97, and he was an amazing man. One of the highlights of my childhood was going to work with him on this campus. I would spend time with him while he was going back and forth from the Hopeman building to the library, to the medical school, and in my mind's eye, I'm running behind him, trying to keep up. He walked so fast, and he never took an elevator, and he was always in a hurry. But he was never too busy for me or my 4 siblings. He had this really gentle way of teaching. It was so gentle that you often didn't even know he was conveying a lesson. My siblings and I attended a festschrift for him when he retired here on this campus, and listening to his former students, one after the other, get up and describe what it was like to work with him, told a version of the same story. It went like this. So we'd bring an idea in to see Dr. C, and he'd say, "Interesting, have a seat, and let's talk." And about an hour later, you'd be walking out the door, and he'd be telling you what a terrific idea you had. And it would take you a few minutes before you realized it was a very different idea than the one you brought to him. Now, growing up as the daughter of a scientist is interesting. Ask President Mangelsdorf. There were many lessons embedded in everyday life. And in hindsight, I realized the main lesson my dad taught us was to question, to doubt, to look for evidence. Not doubt in a cynical way, not at all. Both of my parents were awe-inspired by the beauty of the natural world, but rather doubt in the way that author Annie Lamott writes. She wrote, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty." He taught us to have faith, but not to hold on too tightly to our beliefs. The tentative nature of science, he once wrote, does not speak against science. It is science. Now, in our home, there was no pressure to pursue academics or any other particular career. The message was to be the best that we could be, and not the best, mind you, the best that we could be. And when we were graduating from high school and being launched from the home, none of us Carstensen children took traditional paths, none of us. One brother went to Oberlin and then dropped out and moved to a shack in the Sierras where he became a naturalist. Another brother dropped out of Ohio State to become a woodworker and a builder. The youngest of us moved to Mexico to work at the American School in Guadalajara. And my sister Dee, who's here today, studied at the Eastman Preparatory School as a child and went on to become a professional harpist and singer-songwriter, and now owns NYC Records with her husband. I had no interest in college. And now what I'm going to do is to skip over a lot. It was the 70s, let me just leave it at that. But one day, night, after a concert with friends, I was a passenger in a VW van. It turns out the driver was drunk. He careened off down a hill, and I ended up at Strong Memorial Hospital for months. With a cracked femur, crushed knee, scores of fractures, punctured lung, concussions, bad shape. The physicians at Strong literally saved my life. Thank you. Thank you. Now, after multiple surgeries, the pieces started to come back together, and for months, I laid on my back with my legs strung in the air. You know, that comic strip kind of image of, you know, your legs up there and your fat on your back, and I was 21. And after a while, it got pretty boring. The nurses are true healers. I'm gonna shout out to the nurses. The nurses assigned me a job. They said my roommates were going to be older patients, and my job was to keep them oriented and happy. Now, of course, in hindsight, they had a plan to help me, right? So my dad would visit, and when I began to complain about, you know, getting a little bored, he said one day, "What about taking a course at the university?" And I looked at him like, I can't go. And he said, "No, I'll go to the classes for you and record them. Pick a course." And I said, "Not physics." He goes, "Okay." He says, "Pick a topic, anything." And I said psychology, and that was an ending and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. My dad attended every lecture and introductory psychology and brought audio tapes to me at Strong Memorial Hospital. So I took intro psychology in the hospital surrounded by old women. And we had so much more in common than broken bones. I got to know them, and I began to question over time how much of aging is biological, and it is, but how much of it is really shaped by the social world. In many ways, that's the same question I'm still asking many years later in academics. Without the University of Rochester, I would have lived an entirely different life. But I learned about psychology from the likes of Harry Reese and Marone Zuckerman and Ed Deasy. They were very young at the time, by the way. And many others who have since moved on from the university. So this is my story about gratitude for the university, for my father, for the teachers, doctors, and nurses. But my reason for telling you my story today is to reassure you that it's often when things break that you discover who you are. These are not the best of times. Your studies began during COVID, and they're ending during a time of wars and political turmoil. Know that during the most challenging times, you sometimes find your passions. During emotionally tough times, you find out you are strong. Stand up for your beliefs. Be charitable to others. And don't ever forget to look at the sky. Peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Carstensen, for those wonderful remarks. I want to tell a little story. That's why I'm not letting her sit back down. In the course of selecting you to present your inspirational remarks, it came to my attention that you harbored some doubt about whether you actually ever got a university diploma. I know that your comments come from a sense of humility, but I want to put those doubts to rest and give you an official copy of your diploma.